Factoring has been our setup for future work with quadratic equations and functions. So today we're going to look at solving simple quadratic equations such as x squared is equal to 25. With the goal of any equation, solving an equation, the goal is to isolate the variable. And currently, our variable x is not on its own, it's squared. So in order to isolate that, what we will have to do is we will have to take the square root of x squared, which would be x. And since I took the square root of the left side of the equation, I must also take the square root of the right side of the equation, or the square root of 25. So x is going to be equal to the square root of 25. An important thing to remember is that when we take square roots, we must consider both the positive and the negative root. So I'm going to put a plus and a minus in front of the square root of 25. The square root of 25 is equal to 5, and again, that could either be a positive 5 or a negative 5. The reason for this is because if I take a positive 5, and I square it, that would be equal to 25. But in the same way, if I open parentheses and put a negative 5 and square that, that's the same as saying negative 5 times negative 5. And we know that the product of two negatives is a positive, which would be a positive 25. Therefore, it is crucial that we put positive and negative in front of the 5 for this solution. That's one of the basic setup questions, and I'm going to introduce another one now. So we could label that as question 1, and now we're going to move on to 2. So now I'm going to give another quadratic equation that we're going to solve. X squared plus 4 is equal to 40. And the goal of any equation when we're solving it is to isolate the variable x. In order to start this up, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to move the plus 4, because that is preventing x from being alone, in addition to the exponent. But the first step would be to use inverse operations and take away 4 from both sides. And now we would be left with x squared, which is helping us to get closer to having x isolated. And this is equal to 40 minus 4, which is 36. And then, so now we have x squared equals 36, very similar to the one that we just did now. And we're going to have to isolate the variable x by taking the square root of both sides of the equation. The square root of the left side would be the square root of x squared, which would be x. Bring down the equal sign. The square root of 36 is a 6, and we must consider that that could either be positive or negative 6. So the solution needs to include both positive and negative 6. Another example for this video would be the third one. Uh, 2x squared minus 1 is equal to 11. First, we're going to have to add the 1 to both sides, since that is in the way. And I'm adding it to undo subtraction using the inverse operation. The 2x squared would come down. These cancel out. The equal sign comes down, and now this is a 12. And again, my goal is to always have the plan of isolating x. And I would like to get x squared alone before doing that. And since 2 is being multiplied by x squared, I'm going to divide each side of the equation by 2. Now, the 2's cancel out to be a 1, and you're just left with 1x squared, or x squared, equals 6. And again, we don't have a solution yet because x is not on its own yet. In order to have x equals, or have x on its own, I'm going to have to take the square root of both sides. So x would be equal to the square root of 6, and you need to put a positive and a negative symbol in front of that, because both of them are valid solutions. And I cannot reduce the square root of 6. I can express it as a decimal, however, I'm going to leave it in radical form, and I'm going to consider if there's any way of simplifying it, but in this case there is not. So I'm going to leave my answer, or the solution, as x equals positive or negative square root of 6. Another word for solution that you will see is a root. These are synonyms. And another one is x-intercept. We will be talking more about this at length, but as an introduction, these are some synonyms. Another one would be a 0. So these 4 words are synonyms, and it would be expressing the solution.